The twin sons of Zephyria painted the crystal spires of Athens city in shades of gold and amber. Lyra Velthera stood on her laboratory balcony, watching the morning light dance across the floating gardens that surrounded her world's capital. The Aetherians had built their civilization on harmony, their translucent blue skin and silver eyes reflecting their peaceful nature. For 3,000 years, they had studied the stars, created art that sang with cosmic energy, and lived without knowing war. Lyra adjusted her research scanner, focusing on the quantum patterns that flowed through their planet's unique crystal formations. These formations powered their cities, healed their sick, and connected their minds in a gentle telepathic network that bound their species together. She was close to a breakthrough in quantum resonance theory, something that could revolutionize interstellar communication across the galaxy. The peaceful morning shattered when the sky began to burn. Dark shapes emerged from hyperspace, like wombs torn in reality itself. The Kethvar war fleet materialized above Zephyria with the sudden violence of a thunderstorm. Their ships were brutal things, all sharp edges and pulsing red lights, built not for exploration or trade, but for one purpose: conquest. The Kethvar Empire had swept across 17 star systems in the past decade, leaving nothing but ash and chains in their wake. They were reptilian beings, scaled and cold, with yellow eyes that held no mercy. Their society was built on domination, their technology focused on subjugation, and their hunger for slaves was endless. General Thakmor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Crusher, his scarred hide gleaming under the war room's crimson lights. His species stood nearly 8 feet tall, with razor-sharp claws and teeth like obsidian daggers. Around his neck hung a collection of trophies, the crystallized eyes of conquered leaders from a dozen worlds. "Begin the harvest," he growled to his subordinates. "These blue skins look soft. They'll make excellent workers in the neutronium mines." The bombardment began without warning. Energy beams lanced down from orbit, not to destroy but to paralyze. The Kethvar didn't want to damage their future property. Instead, they used neural disruptors that shut down the Aetherians' telepathic network, leaving them isolated and confused for the first time in millennia. Lyra watched in horror as the crystal spires of her city began to dim. The quantum resonance that had powered their civilization for centuries started to fail. All around her, fellow Aetherians collapsed as their mental connections severed, the loss hitting them like physical pain. Transport ships descended like metallic locusts. Kethvar ground forces poured out, their powered armor making them look like demons from the ancient myths. They moved with military precision, herding the stunned Aetherians into containment fields. Those who resisted were stunned into unconsciousness. Those who fled were hunted down by mechanical trackers. The invasion lasted 6 hours. In that time, a civilization that had known only peace for 3 millennia was reduced to a slave population. Lyra managed to escape in the chaos, her scientific training helping her think clearly when others panicked. She made her way to the emergency bunkers beneath the Astral Observatory, where a handful of other survivors had gathered. Among them was Elder Corvain, the keeper of their ancient archives. "This cannot be happening," whispered Jarek, a young pilot whose hands still shook from witnessing the destruction. "We sent distress calls to the Galactic Council. Surely someone will come to help us." Elder Corvain's silver eyes dimmed with sorrow. "Child, the Council fears the Kethvar as much as any world. They have grown too powerful, their fleet too vast. No single species dares challenge them anymore." "Then what can we do?" Lyra asked, her voice breaking. "Our people, our children, they're being loaded onto those transport ships like cargo." The elder was quiet for a long moment, his ancient mind reaching back through centuries of memory. "There are stories," he said finally, "old tales from the Outer Rim, from before the Great Silence. They speak of a species that never bowed, never surrendered, no matter the odds." "You mean the Terrans," said Dr. Dila, the observatory's chief researcher. "The humans, but they vanished 200 years ago. Most believe they destroyed themselves in their own wars. Or, Corvain said slowly, "They chose to disappear for reasons we don't understand. The old records speak of their final message before the silence fell. They said they were not gone, only waiting." Lyra felt a spark of desperate hope. The deep space beacon on Kepler Station. It's an old human outpost on the dead moon of Sirion. If it still functions. It's been silent for 2 centuries, Jarek protested. Even if humans still exist somewhere, why would they help us? They don't know us. Elder Corvain stood, his aged frame somehow finding strength. Because if the stories are true, if even half the legends about human nature are accurate, they won't be able to ignore what's happening here. Humans, according to the archives, had one trait that defined them above all others. What trait? Lyra asked. They couldn't stand bullies. The survivors worked through the night, using salvaged equipment to boost a signal toward the Xyrian moon. It was a desperate gamble, a message sent into the void with little hope of response. Lyra composed the transmission herself, pouring all her people's anguish into the words. To any who receive this message, she began, her voice steady despite her fear. The Aetherian people of Zephyria cry out in darkness. We are enslaved, our world conquered by the Kethvar Empire. We have no weapons, no armies, no hope except the old stories that say somewhere in the black between stars, humanity endures. If you exist, if you remember what it means to stand against tyranny, please, help us. Help all of us. The signal launched into hyperspace, carrying with it the desperate prayers of a dying civilization. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Kethvar Empire continued its expansion. On the trade world of Nexus Prime, Ambassador Quindar of the Valkyrie Consortium received reports of 3 more systems falling to the reptilian conquerors. His people were merchants and diplomats, skilled in negotiation but helpless against military might. They're moving faster now, reported his aide, a nervous Valkyrie named Turnik. Intelligence suggests they're building something massive in the Kepler Nebula. Some kind of superweapon. Quindar's 4 arms trembled as he reviewed the tactical displays. The Kethvar weren't just conquering worlds anymore. They were transforming them. Slave worlds became factory planets. Their populations worked to death building more ships, more weapons, feeding an ever-growing war machine. What of the coalition forces? He asked, though he already knew the answer. The Thorian defense fleet was destroyed at Sigma Centauri. The survivors are retreating to the inner systems. General consensus is that we should negotiate surrender terms before they reach the core worlds. The ambassador closed his eyes, feeling the weight of countless lives on his conscience. His species had survived for millennia through careful diplomacy and trade agreements. They had never been warriors, never needed to be. Now that weakness would doom them all. In the depths of space, far beyond the reach of galactic civilization, something stirred on the frozen moon of Sirion. The ancient beacon that had been silent for 2 centuries suddenly flared to life. Deep beneath the ice, automated systems that had waited patiently in hibernation began their awakening protocols. The message from Zephyria had reached its destination. On Earth, now hidden behind a dimensional barrier that made it invisible to conventional sensors, the emergency session of the Human Defense Council convened for the first time in 200 years. Admiral Sarah Chen, her hair now silver with age, but her eyes still burning with the fire that had made her legendary, studied the intercepted transmissions from across the galaxy. The Kethvar Empire, she said to the assembled officers. We've been monitoring them for decades. They're exactly what we were afraid would emerge during our absence. Captain Marcus Steele, leader of the elite Phantom Corps, leaned forward in his chair. Ma'am, our scouts report they've enslaved over 40 worlds. Billions of beings are suffering under their rule. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the Council's chief xenobiologist, pulled up holographic displays of the various enslaved species. The psychological profiles are consistent with historical patterns of oppression. These beings are peaceful by nature, evolved for cooperation rather than conflict. They simply don't have the capability to resist. The room fell silent as the weight of decision settled on them. Humanity had withdrawn from galactic affairs after the devastating colonial wars, choosing isolation over the risk of their own darker impulses consuming them again. They had spent 2 centuries learning to be better, to control the very aggression that had once made them formidable. But now, faced with the systematic enslavement of innocent civilizations, the old instincts stirred. At last, Admiral Chen called to the AI construct that managed their defense networks. Analysis of current human military capabilities versus HFY forces. The artificial intelligence's voice filled the chamber, calm and precise. Based on current intelligence, human technological advancement during isolation has exceeded galactic norms by approximately 300%. Probability of successful military intervention, 97.3%. Casualties, asked the Admiral. Among hostile forces, extensive. Among enslaved populations during liberation, minimal with proper strategic planning. Among human forces, within acceptable parameters. Admiral Chen stood, her decision made. 200 years ago, we withdrew from the galaxy because we feared what we might become if we continued fighting. Today, we remember why we fought in the first place. She turned to address the full council. Gentlemen, ladies, AIs, and enhanced beings, the age of human isolation is over. It's time to remind the galaxy why they used to tell stories about us. The beacon on Xerion transmitted a single word back through hyperspace, a word that would change the fate of countless worlds. Acknowledge. The response came faster than anyone had dared hope. 3 days after Lyra's desperate transmission, space itself seemed to ripple near the Xerion system. Reality twisted and folded as something vast emerged from dimensions that conventional physics insisted didn't exist. The human fleet materialized like ghosts becoming solid. Their ships were unlike anything the galaxy had seen, sleek and organic-looking, as if grown rather than built. They moved with purpose and deadly grace, their hulls shimmering with energy fields that bent light around them. At the fleet's heart was the HMS Retribution, Admiral Sarah Chen's flagship. It was a beautiful and terrible thing. 3 kilometers of flowing metal and contained starfire. Weapons that could crack moons were hidden beneath its elegant curves, while its shields could withstand the combined firepower of a dozen HFY dreadnoughts. Aboard the Retribution, Admiral Chen stood on the command deck, her augmented eyes taking in tactical displays that would have overwhelmed baseline humans. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, many of them enhanced with cybernetic implants or genetic modifications that had been developed during humanity's long isolation. "Ma'am, we're receiving transmissions from the enslaved worlds," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres, her neural interface glowing softly as she processed thousands of distress signals simultaneously. The HFY have approximately 2 million beings in work camps across the sector. 8 LAS, deployment options, Chen ordered. The AI's voice filled the bridge, its tone carrying subtle emotional undertones that spoke of its advanced consciousness. Recommended strategy. Operation Shepherd's Crook. Simultaneous liberation of all enslaved populations while systematically dismantling HFY military infrastructure. Estimated completion time, 72 hours. Captain Marcus Steele stepped forward, his Phantom Corps armor already sealed and ready for deployment. The suit was a marvel of human engineering, making him faster than any natural being and strong enough to punch through starship hulls. His face was hidden behind a reflective visor, but his voice carried the weight of absolute confidence. "Admiral, my teams are ready for immediate deployment. We've been preparing for this moment for 2 centuries." Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her xenobiological analysis station. "I've completed the psychological profiles of both oppressor and victim species. The HFY are hierarchical bullies. They understand only strength and fear. The enslaved species are trauma-bonded, but will respond positively to liberation if we demonstrate clear superiority." Chen nodded, her decision crystallizing. "Very well. Signal the fleet. Operation Shepherd's Crook is a go." Captain Steele, Take your teams and begin ground operations. I want every slave camp liberated and every Kethvar commander to understand that their reign of terror is over. The human fleet split into precise formations, each ship group targeting a different enslaved world. They moved with the coordinated precision of a single organism, their actions guided by quantum-entangled communications that allowed instantaneous coordination across vast distances. On Zephyria, General Thakmor was reviewing the latest shipment of Aetherian slaves when his communications officer burst into his command chamber. "General, we have unknown contacts entering the system. Their technology doesn't match any known configuration." Thakmor's scared face twisted into a sneer. "Fools! Some backwater species thinks they can challenge the Kethvar Empire. Show them the price of defiance." The Kethvar Defense Fleet, 36 heavy cruisers and twice as many smaller vessels, moved to intercept the human ships. Their weapons charge, targeting systems locked onto the strange vessels that dared enter their territory. The humans didn't even slow down. The HMS Raffle, a human destroyer barely half the size of a Kethvar cruiser, engaged the enemy fleet alone. Its captain, Commander Lisa Park, had volunteered for the honor of first contact. Her ship's quantum cascade weapons fired once, sending ripples through space-time itself. 6 Kethvar ships simply ceased to exist, their molecular bonds unraveling at the quantum level. The others found their shields useless against weapons that attacked the fundamental forces holding matter together. "This is Commander Park of the Human Defense Force." She transmitted on all frequencies. "Kethvar vessels, you are ordered to stand down and prepare to be boarded. Your crimes against sentient life end today." General Thakmor stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. "Impossible. Our ships are the most advanced in the galaxy." "Not anymore," his tactical officer whispered, her voice filled with a fear the Kethvar had never known. The human fleet began its work with surgical precision. Drop pods launched from their ships, each one containing a Phantom Corps operative. These elite soldiers had trained for 2 centuries in virtual combat simulations, perfecting techniques for liberating enslaved populations without causing collateral damage. Captain Steele's pod struck the surface of Zephyria like a meteor, his suit's shock absorbers turning what should have been a fatal impact into a gentle landing. Around him, other pods deployed his team, each operative targeting a specific Kethvar installation. The rescue operation was a masterpiece of planning and execution. Steele moved through the slave compound like a force of nature, his enhanced speed making him appear to teleport from one location to another. Kethvar guards fired desperately at shadows, their weapons ineffective against human shielding technology. "Attention enslaved beings," Steele transmitted through universal translators. "You are being liberated by the Human Defense Force. Move to the designated safe zones. Your freedom is at hand." Lyra Velthera, still hiding in the observatory bunkers, couldn't believe what she was seeing through the security feeds. The mysterious humans moved with impossible skill and precision, systematically dismantling the Kethvar occupation force. Their technology seemed almost magical, turning the reptilian conquerors' advantages into weaknesses. But it was the way they treated the freed slaves that truly amazed her. Each human operative took time to communicate with the rescued beings, offering comfort and medical aid. They shared their own food rations with starving captives and provided psychological support to those traumatized by their ordeal. "They're real," Elder Corvain whispered, tears streaming down his aged face. "The stories were true. They came back for us." In space, the human fleet was systematically destroying the Kethvar military presence, but they weren't simply obliterating their enemies. Admiral Chen had ordered that any Kethvar who surrendered would be treated according to the galactic conventions of warfare. "This is Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Force," she transmitted to General Thakmor's flagship. "You have 15 minutes to evacuate all civilian personnel from your vessels. After that, we will consider your ships legitimate military targets." Thakmor's claws dug into his command throne. No enemy had ever offered him terms before. In Kethvar culture, defeat meant death or slavery. This offer of mercy was something he couldn't comprehend. Why? He transmitted back. We are your enemies. We have enslaved your allies. Chen's response came back immediately. Because we choose to be better than you. 15 minutes, General. Don't waste them. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on dozens of worlds. The human fleet moved like a tide of liberation, freeing enslaved populations and dismantling the infrastructure of oppression. They fought with deadly efficiency when necessary, but always with restraint and precision. On Nexus Prime, Ambassador Quindar watched the tactical displays with wonder. The humans had appeared in the Kethvar home system and were systematically destroying the Empire's central command structure. But they were doing it with such surgical precision that civilian casualties were nearly zero. How is this possible? He asked his aide. Their technology, their tactics, it's beyond anything we've ever seen. Dr. Elena Vasquez's voice came through the communication channel, addressing the galactic community for the first time in 2 centuries. We had 200 years to think about what we wanted to become. We chose to become protectors instead of conquerors. The final battle took place in the Kepler Nebula, where the Kethvar had been building their ultimate weapon, a planet killer that could destroy entire worlds with a single shot. General Thakmor had retreated there with the remnants of his fleet, determined to make a final stand. The human fleet arrived to find the massive weapon powered up and aimed at Saphiria. You want to play savior? Thakmor transmitted, his voice filled with desperate rage. Then watch as I destroy everything you've tried to save. The planet killer began to charge, its massive energy collectors drawing power from the nebula itself. In minutes, it would have enough energy to crack Saphiria like an egg. Admiral Chen smiled, her enhanced mind calculating probabilities faster than any biological brain could manage. 8 Las. Execute Protocol Omega. The Retribution moved forward alone, positioning itself directly between the planet killer and its target. The massive weapon fired, unleashing enough energy to destroy a solar system. The beam struck the Retribution's shields and simply stopped. Impossible, Thakmor whispered. Not impossible, Chen replied. Just 2 centuries more advanced than your understanding of physics. The Retribution's main weapon charge, a device that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality itself. When it fired, it didn't destroy the planet killer. Instead, it transformed it, turning the massive weapon into a beacon of hope that would broadcast the story of liberation across the galaxy. With their ultimate weapon neutralized and their fleet scattered, the Kethvar Empire collapsed. Some surrendered and accepted human terms for rehabilitation. Others fled to the Outer Rim, where they would spend their remaining years as pirates and raiders rather than galactic conquerors. The liberation was complete. In the aftermath, representatives from across the galaxy gathered on Saphiria to witness the signing of the new Galactic Accord. Humanity had returned not as conquerors, but as guardians, offering their protection to any world that chose peace over aggression. Lyra Velthera, now serving as her people's ambassador, stood beside Admiral Chen as they watched the ceremony. The crystal spires of Ethan City were being rebuilt, their quantum resonance patterns enhanced by human technology to be even more beautiful than before. Why did you really come back? Lyra asked. After 2 centuries of isolation, why risk everything for strangers? Chen smiled, her eyes reflecting the light of Saphiria's twin suns. Because we remembered something important during our time away. The universe is vast and dark, but it doesn't have to be cruel. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is choose to be kind. The new age had begun. Humanity had returned to the galaxy not as the warriors they had once been, but as the protectors they had chosen to become. And across the stars, beings slept peacefully knowing that somewhere in the darkness, humans were watching over them. The age of terror was over. The age of hope had begun.